Hello, welcome in. In this video, I'm going to be using a technique for watercolor called wet in wet. So the area I want the paint to flow into is getting a layer of plain water, and then I'm going to just touch in a little bit of watercolor paint I've got mixed up on the palette. And that pigment's going to diffuse through the water, and it's going to dry with this nice soft look like the pebbles beside it, creating a area of highlight in the center, and the pigment's going to move to the outside edge where that droplet of water is. I'm just using the way the paint, the way this medium works to achieve the effect of a group of rocks and pebbles, maybe on a riverbank, maybe on a beach. Ooh, got a little carried away with that one. I'm going to adjust that just by wicking that pigment right back out using a little bit of tissue. It's a pretty forgiving medium. We'll let that dry down and we'll see how it turns out. And I'm just going to move on to the next space. Drop that water in. I've already selected a variety of pigments, including raw umber, raw sienna, sepia, ultramarine blue, a little bit of sap green. I'm aiming for colors that are earthy, not too vibrant. In this composition, anything too vibrant will really pull the eye. So we touch that pigment in there and it just diffuses with the water. It's a little bit magical. So the rest of the painting is dry. These pebbles adjacent are dry. The water could draw in some of the pigment from those, but the pigment won't spread into the other areas. I wised up a little bit last time I was working just wherever my eye was taking me, so I was all over the painting. This time I'm trying to work from the left down to the right because I'm right-handed. And that way, if you work that way, you keep from dragging the heel of your hand through the wet paint and making making a bit of a mess. Watercolor medium it's pretty forgiving. If you've got something that's blurred or smeared, let it dry, then you can re-wet it and draw it off. I find that when I get into it and start fussing with it, I can really get the paint work down into the fiber of the paper, and it takes a little discipline to just let it go and come back to it later. It's true of a lot of things in life. Some things you can fix right there in the moment, and other things is just more prudent to let it cool down a bit. How's everybody doing this evening? It's good to see you out there. Thanks for coming in, spending a little time. It's all it takes. Doesn't take a lot of fussing. This will be the third video working on this. It's a pretty good-sized painting. If you've been on my channel much, you know I like to do the little 3-inch squares. But sometimes it's nice to switch it up and come in with something a little bit larger. Felt like that one was flooded a little bit too much. So that burnt sienna was looking a little too red, so I'm bringing in some sap green. Hello out there. Hope everybody's doing well. Nice to see you. Thanks for joining. I'm just bringing in a little bit of ultramarine blue. So I've been working with watercolor paint that granulates, meaning the pigment disperses in the water, but the pigments have an affinity to join together, so they lock up into these little groups, and then they settle out and they make these wonderful patterns, these areas of dark and light. Sometimes with watercolor, the artist is seeking a wash that's very uniform. For example, if I was painting a sky and I had splotches and blotches like this, it might not work for that subject matter, but granulating watercolor works pretty well for things that you want texture. In rocks, maybe roadway, bricks, all kinds. Anything that would benefit from having a bit of extra texture. I think acrylic paints work in a much more uniform way. this sort of difference between a textured finish and a smooth finish between different pigments is a property that watercolor exhibits. And I should think oil might do it too, but I don't really work much in oil, so if anybody knows, feel free to drop a comment about it. Now, some of these pebbles I'm working on can be a bit bright, but when the painting is finished, I want the eye to be drawn to the bigger rocks, not these individual pebbles. So I'm trying to keep their intensity below the intensity of the larger rocks. And it's not quite as straight as this paint has to be brighter than this paint, because this whole area and the intensity and the hue and the warmth or relative coolness of the hue has to be balanced. So a very small rock that was bright and a warm color, that could pull the eye away from a larger cool area of a decreased hue. Might have been out in the weeds on that one, but it's just one of the things I think about as I'm working through. And I'm not fussing with it overly much. I'm just trying to keep that in mind. If you fuss with it a lot, you'll do more thinking than you do painting. And there's a lot of things that you can think and think and think about them, and you can't really bring yourself to the right answer. A little bit of thinking does us good. But overthinking, especially when experience is such a good teacher, overthinking's not the way to go. Pick up the brush and paint. That's how you'll learn what happens. And I will say, when it comes to watercolor paint and paper, it's not the end of the world if you make a mistake when you're painting. You'll probably learn something from it, and it's just paper. So go ahead and let yourself paint, play, see what happens. The way you hold a brush, the way you choose your pigments, it's going to be individualized to you. That's where the creativity gets expressed, and it doesn't get expressed if you're in your head just thinking. Overthinking your choices. What palette should I use? What size paper? Just paint. Y'all are quiet tonight. If anybody wants to share, I'd love to hear what kind of crafts or what kind of art you like to do yourself. Hello, Maya. Welcome in, fellow painter. Sorry I wasn't able to join you and Brad yesterday. About as soon as I got set up, I was thinking maybe I could join you for the last hour. And then I had contractors show up, so. And it was the final day of the project, so I did need to go out and get them to take care of the final details of the things that they said they were going to do. And then, of course, you get to the end of the job, and they managed to leave a big bucket of rotten wood that they said they were going to dispose of, so. And he'd told me twice he'd haul it off to the. We have a transfer station that items get sorted out and they get recycled or repurposed, and then what's true trash goes up to a site that burns it. So he'd said he was going to haul it off, and I said, "Oh, that's a pretty good sized pile. Are you going to haul that off today?" "Oh no, we've got more to take out." Okay, all right. So I had a nice crisp $50 bill there to tip them if they'd done everything they'd said they were going to do on the job. And at the end of it, he tacked an extra $50 onto the bill himself and didn't do all the details, but he did the most of it, and it looks much better. He got I would say 95% of the job done the way that we made a deal for it to get done. But I do tend to tip pretty generously if everything's to suit, and I don't complain too much. I just don't tip if it's messed up. So anyway, it's all wrapped up, it's all paid, it's out of my hair. So and the yard guy showed up, and I'm scratching my head over this because I had a small business and I had employees, and I gave them the list of work we needed to accomplish in any given day. And as a boss, I tended to roll up my sleeves and get into it, the tasks right along with employees. I wasn't the kind of boss who would ask an employee to do something I wasn't doing. And I didn't encounter too many unwilling people. If they showed me who they were and they were not a worker, and they, sat down the minute I left the shop and didn't do a lick of work until I came back, they didn't stay on my schedule. But I will say for the most part that people would do what was expected of them. And somewhere around 2020 or so, I've just noticed that people don't do that anymore just more often than I like to encounter. And I don't know why that is, and I wish the world would go back to the way it was before, when you said, "I've got a job, here's the pay, here's the tasks," and people would just damn well do it. And now you say, "Here's the job, here's the pay," and they say, "Nope, I want more," and you work it out, and then they do what they want and want to be paid in full. So you're old when you start looking at the world going, boy, when I was a youngster, if your boss told you to do something, you did it. So apparently that is up for negotiation or whatever. But I mean, if that's the way people are working these days, I'm glad I'm retired because I'm finding it frustrating. Complain, complain, complain. Yeah. So I'm kind of grouchy. The yard guy also just I I had him come back today. He was here about a week ago, and I had him come back specifically to take care of a hedge that's the the root and the trunk of it is on my property, but the branches go over into a neighbor's place, and she has complained to the homeownership group that my arborvitae is looking at her funny, I think is what it amounts to. And the management company said, well, you need to trim the branches so it doesn't extend over into her place. Never mind that she planted a row of arborvitae literally in my backyard. And when I called management, they said, well, she's already planted them and they look okay, so we're not going to tell her to pull them up. So I lost about 2 feet of my property in the backyard. So anyway, I told my yard guy, just cut it straight. Look down the line, and where the branches come over, I don't really care. Cut them off. And he said, but it'll look brown inside. And I said, I don't care. She wants those branches off. She can look at it brown. And he just was very unwilling to do that. And he puts me in a pinch because he's related to my stepmother, so I can't. He's not optional. He just kind of comes with the family, so I figured, fine, I'll just have him do what he does, and then I'll take the clippers to it myself. And then when he comes back and goes, "Why is it all brown?" I'll say, "Because that's what I did. It's my tree, my yard, my my problem, and have to answer to this management company that's like." I think it's what the kids call a little bit of malicious compliance, and I'm not above it. If that's the world, I'm just gonna do it. Yeah. So, you gotta be careful in this world what you ask for. Sometimes you get what you ask for. Anyway, so I was out taking stuff over to the yard debris bin and moving around, and I am sore and I am cranky. And tomorrow is Monday. I'm gonna see if I can paint some of this grumpiness away. I don't know. What do you guys think? Possible? Yeah, he does. He comes with, and here's the thing. It's like it's my dad's wife, and she's pretty clear that I got a brother out there who calls her new mom. I don't know. I just call her by her first name. Ay, ay, ay. And that's the way she wants it. I'd do it differently. When she talks about us, she talks about her kids and then Janelle, and yeah, she calls us by our first name, but she never refers to us as her stepkids or I don't know. I guess in that situation, you just have to make a few overtures, do your best, and if a person doesn't want to have a different role, if you want to have a relationship, everybody's got to agree to it. So we can only go so far. I think a lot of the world probably deals with this variety of parents in not just having like mom and dad from the time you're a kid to the time you're an adult. I think I can't think of anybody I know who's, well, no, I can think of a few people, but very few people. Most everybody I know has got a step parent or a remarried parent. But my folks were together for about 50 years, and my mom passed, and then my dad remarried very quickly. So, at 50 years, you can imagine I was well into middle age when this new person came into my life. So it's not like, mommy, kids. It's more dad's wife. Anyway, at the end of the day, I spend more time with. I got my brushes switched over, and now I am. Gotta rearrange myself here. I'm gonna be dipping with fresh water and dirty paint, and we don't want that. Yeah, so I actually spend more time with my dad's wife's brother-in-law than I spend with her. World. 14, Maya. That must have been mind-bending. Maya said she didn't meet one of her parents until she was 14 years old. Not gonna lie, I was a bit of a nightmare at 14. I think if my actual parent had met me when I was that age, they would have said one and done. I mean, I was trying and it meant well, but 14's hard. 14's a little bit tough. Your mouth goes fast, your brain goes slow. Your emotions go higher than about any other time in your life. So had you had contact before then, or you just like, hello, first day meeting? She says meeting her parent for the first time at 14 was weird. That seems like a huge understatement. That might just have blown a circuit. It's funny, some paintings go very smoothly, and then there are other ones that feel like they're all awkward corners, and I'm wondering if I usually when I draw in the circles, I try to turn the paper so that I don't get this directionality. I like the rocks and pebbles to look like they were scattered. And if you work from the same spot, your hand's in the same place, and you tend to get an alignment. So to break that, what I do is turn the page quite a bit. And I'm finding I'm just in, like, I'm wondering if I need to turn the painting around to be able to feel a little bit more comfortable. It just feels like I'm putting the brush and everything's in just as awkward space. It sometimes it goes that way. But that's the thing about rocks. They're kind of easy to paint because I guess when I come to look at it, I don't know what a particular rock looked like, so can't really say, well, that's not a good representation of that pebble, because it'll be fine. It'll be just fine. That said, I'm going to give this a turn. Gonna listen to that feeling that things aren't quite right, and sometimes that's it. You just need to come at it from a different angle. Take a look here, make sure there's nothing too wet to drag my hand through, and start again up towards the corner. Let's just go right into the corner. So I actually have two brushes. Using the one that's a little bit bigger for the water, and what is this one? A number 2 round for the paint. I usually try to pick brushes with different handles when I'm doing this kind of technique because it shows better. But so if it looks like 2 brushes, or it looks like the same brush, it's not. It's actually 2, and I think this one's a 4. Yep. Next size up. This way I don't have to swish the brush out in between every time and just trying to work clean. feel like this painting is just taking its time to get completed. The last one went very smoothly and very, very fast. So each painting's a bit different, I guess. Sometimes it feels like the process just goes so quickly, and I'll look down and I'll feel like I want to paint more pebbles, I guess, is probably the best way to describe it. And then suddenly I'll look down and everything's all filled in. And sometimes it's funny. There's emotions that go with it. I'm kind of made friends with a particular painting, and then when it's over with, I feel a little tinge of sadness because I really enjoyed spending time with it. Then you start another one, and then hopefully you get that same feeling with the next painting, that you just enjoy spending time with it. It becomes a sort of a friend. You'll know it's there in the studio, and might be out taking care of the business of life and think, oh, I can't wait to get back and spend more time. Certainly not all paintings, but if you can get that feeling going. No, I've done plenty of them that where the feeling was more frustration than friendly. The more you work, the friendlier they get. So I've used a pigment called indigo that is very willing to re-wet and to move into wet areas. So, and this big rock is painted with indigo, so I'm not fighting it too much. I'm just letting it diffuse. I'm tapping in a little indigo with the paint I'm mixing up over here on the palette. Try not to fight it too much. Whoops. Maya says she is evaluating her stash to see if there's anything she can share with another artist. That's pretty cool. when you first start something, it's pretty easy to get your eyes dazzled by all of the beautiful things that that are not that are a little bit steps aside, and you don't know that you're kind of stepping off into a new path because it just looks like you're trying something new. Let me back up and explain that. So we have a mutual friend who is working in watercolor. He started painting with watercolor. He's very new at this, and he's making tremendous strides. And he's taking some steps off to the side to an adjacent path, which is inks, and inks work really differently from watercolors. Maybe that, you know, his medium might be ink, but the teacher in me is just wanting him to explore watercolors a little bit more. And he'll find his way. He'll find his way. I know he's got kind of an introductory palette with not too many watercolor paints, and it's a little bit, it's not a little bit, it's a lot expensive to expand your palette. If you can get sets, that can be an economical way to do it, but, and it's also, it's really hard to know because you go and you look at watercolor paints and there are, I mean, easily in a basic display, 15 different reds, and they all intermix a little bit differently. And the red that might catch your eye, if you hadn't worked with the paint a little bit, well, it's just really different looking at the tubes than it is squirting it out and then mixing it with water and mixing it with other colors and seeing what it does. So, whereas the inks are really true to what's on the label. So, having dabbled with both and having been intimidated by watercolors and frustrated by them and not come back to them for, you know, literally 30 years, I certainly understand where he's at. So I think it'll be really fun for him or any new artist to get a gift of art supplies. Because once they're in front of you, once you're at home with them and you can start to experiment, that's experimentation leads to learning. You learn a little bit about the materials, and then you've got a whole new vocabulary that you can express your ideas with. So that was kind of rambly. Sorry about that. And in conclusion, sharing is good. Yeah. Hi, Sophia. Welcome in. It's good to see you. Well, it's gorgeous. She says, thank you so much. Yeah. It is hard to know. It's just, I pretty much like all greens. I like most all blues. Reds, I think just in life I'm not really... I don't like reds the way I like greens. I really, really like greens. I like looking at them, and I like the calm way they I don't know, I just feel calm when I look at greens. I look at reds and it's a different feeling. So when I get the lights set up so I've got a good picture, it's a little bit, it's hard to see where I've gotten, where the water is. Don't mind me being awkward. You might have noticed that. It's just my natural mode. Sophie, it's nice to see you back in. Oh, feels like I had 3 days in one day today. Often Sunday is kind of a slower day, but I had to deal with my dad a couple of times, and the yard guy, and the contractors, and the YouTube, and the cat, and had to run out and get some groceries, and boy. That's a young person's game, that getting up, running around, and dealing with stuff all the time. Once I reached a point where I could have a calm day, just me and the cat. I didn't know the value of that when I was young, but I've come to appreciate it. So Maya says, not sure that made any sense. Me? I may well not have. But I like your idea if two people buy two different kinds of watercolors and each person squeezes a tube into two half pans and then you can trade. I do like art supply tradesies. It makes good sense. Same amount of money, double your color choice. I like it. And if you were saying that what I was saying was making no sense, I'm not sure that today I can make any more sense. This is one of those days. So where it's wet, it feels just a little bit cooler. So this part's pretty good and dry, so don't have to worry too much about dragging my hand across it. I hope. I feel like I need to bring in some green into this, so. Whoops. Speaking of half pans, this one just made a run for it. I really like this Terra Verde, and it was a vintage one, so I'll be able to use it till it's gone. It's almost a jadeite color. It's very, very soft. I did use a little bit of Viridian here, here, and here. Viridian has this malachite cast to it. It's very coppery green. It's very vibrant, and as you can tell, easy to spot. But the Terra Verde mixes in, and I've got a little bit of it mixed in up here. It's just softer. So it doesn't draw the eye too strongly, which is what I want for these pebbles. Well, we're making our way halfway into October. We've had some We've had some beautiful weather in Oregon, and I think might have just touched. It was definitely high 60s, maybe into the low 70s Fahrenheit here today. So it's a nice day to be outside, sunny. No rain, not even any clouds making any threats. And I happened to check the weather forecast because of the contractors and the painting, and painting needs to be done when it's dry and not too much moisture in the air, not too much humidity. And the weather forecast is for rain, and we're going to have a drastic change in the weather. So I was just outside enjoying things, and the yard guy was cutting some of the shrubs in my yard are balsams and evergreens, so it smelled like Christmas trees outside, and it was just really nice. Alrighty, just catching up on some comments here. Yes, my your paint comment made absolute perfect sense. I loved it. I love that idea. Oh. Machtmir Durchgau says, Maya, the adulting and aging nonsense is annoying. I agree, Sophia. And I'm sure I butchered that just like an American. So please forgive me. I'm like everybody. I can get as far as Machtmir and then just not quite sure what to do with that CH. Because in English it should be a ch sound, but I think it's more of a hard sound in German. And anyway, moving on. A little bit of water, a little bit of paint. So, are you guys thinking, is she ever going to get through with this? That's what I'm thinking. I don't know if I've had another painting that's gone to 3 videos. And from the looks of it, I'm not going to finish it tonight. So I'll probably work on it during the daytime, which it's hard for me to get a good enough signal to get any quality to the video when I stream it during the daytime. So I don't know. Yeah, leave a comment below if you want to see the final little pebbles get put in on video, or if you just would like to see a finished painting in the community post. Or, you know, sometimes it's good either way. 6 of one, half dozen of the other is an idiom. There's probably some version of it in Norwegian and German. Hi, Randy. Thank you so much. Randy popped in to give it a like and say hello. I appreciate those likes. Thank you so much. And I appreciate seeing you. And oh, Maya, that's a good idea. Yeah. Like loch. Okay. Doch. Doch. Yeah, that's. I'll have to practice that because there's not anything in English that makes that sound. So. Mm, Doch. Doch? Like loch? I can say, well, we have a street name. I think most towns in America have Loch Lomond. We have a lot of English and Scottish immigrants to America, so I should know how to say it. And we love the what we call the Loch Ness Monster, which is not even remotely a Scottish pronunciation, but I was giggling today because L. Ron Hubcolt popped up in a chat and said, please settle something. Scientology up north and I are having a debate about your name's origins and pronunciation. And sadly, it wasn't, the answer wasn't fancy. It's just Janelle. But I suppose it's French, but it's not deliberately French because my family's, well, I do have French Canadian. I do have Canadian relatives by way of France, but they were not in France. I mean, like 1750 was the last time they were roaming around in France. So you might have some ancestry, but you don't have any culture, if that makes sense. So I reckon it could be pronounced Janelle, but it's just Janelle. And I gotta say, I was utterly charmed that two such awesome people would even take a minute to think about that because I really enjoy those two and appreciate what they do, and I'm just tickled that the world is small enough that our that we can cross paths. And same with you guys. Yeah. Yeah. Well, I asked him if it was pronounced Balaj, and he was like, "Yes, I got the big thumbs up." So, either he's really nice, or I got it right. I don't know, or both. I'm so thrilled for both of them that they had the good news that they've had. They both deserve it. And anytime you can poke a cult in the eye, that's a good day. Tell it, tell that organization, no, you can't push people around, and you can't create your own truth, and you can't make people shut up. Okay, well, I'm getting these little spaces filled in, so just realized this corner is coming along nicely, so that perked me up a little bit. No, I'm trying to remind myself to do so. Most of these need to be done with a very dilute paint. Otherwise, it'll be a whole composition of bright things and the eye won't know where to go. And my goal with this is to have interesting areas. So this is very dark and it's very warm, so that'll pull the eye. And then this one's dark, but I want the viewer to just move. I want the eye to continue to move around, and part of what helps that is to have neutral, paler areas in the background. So, and my inclination is to mix up the prettiest, brightest paint every time and bring it in, but that's just going to create visual confusion if everything is the same intensity. So what that means for the viewer is that anything I'm doing is, at this point, is not terribly dramatic. So it has a purpose. And I know it's not as much fun as watching the big bright circle go down, but when the painting is finished, you'll see what each part brings to the whole. So Sophie says that in German it's pronounced like an SCH, and in English that would be sk, almost like an SK, like school. I'm suspecting that in German it might be softer, like Bosch, BOSCH. That's more of a ch sound. When I did my summer school in Europe, I was in Vienna for 2 weeks, and I never studied German, or I didn't speak German, but listening to it, it sounded fairly comprehensible. I could pick up quite a lot of it. I couldn't pronounce it, couldn't get my tongue and throat and lips to make those sounds, but I was traveling with somebody who had majored in German, and he was impossible. He couldn't order schnitzel to save us from starvation. And so I would just kind of blunder in, and I tried to teach myself a couple of phrases, please and thank you, and may I please have one of those, or one of these, no matter what country I went to. I looked it up and I practiced saying that. My idea being that if I smiled and was polite, that I could indicate with my hand one of these, one of these, please. And um, it got me fed, and it got me coffee. It got me a roll at the bakery, and it got me a book in a bookstore. It worked pretty well. And then the other phrase was, "I'm sorry, I'm American." To which, almost universally, except in France. In France, they were. I'm not going to talk about France. Almost every place, like I would get a sympathetic nod and an "oh yes," and then most everybody uh, would speak to me in very good English, for which they would apologize and say, "I'm sorry, my English is terrible." And I'm quite apologetic about it. This is absolutely perfect English, but yeah, a lot of kindness, and a lot of just saying to myself, "Well, I guess that'll do. Thank you." Wasn't quite what I was pointing at, but it'll work. So, and the other trick, it took me a little bit of time to learn this one, but the other trick is to follow the little old ladies, right? The widows wearing the dark black clothes, or the grandmas, and then kind of look at what they're getting and then ask for the same thing. Particularly in France, do not go first to the counter and say, "I'll have one of those," because it would be $5. And then the grandma would come in and she would get it for 75 cents. So if you didn't want to pay the naive foreigner surtax on anything, you always wait to see what the locals pay. As it took a few times of standing at the counter and waiting your turn, getting something, and it would cost quite a bit, and then the next person in line behind you would order the same thing. And then it would just be like, what? That's just I. Employee had done that to a customer in America, I'd have fired him if they had just taken advantage of somebody like that. But in some other countries, France, apparently, if your employee does that, you think, wow, they're really, but they're enterprising and they're taking care of themselves. I guess. I don't know. Cultural difference, probably. It felt a little personal, but I tried not to take it personally. Well, most of us call you Maya. There's the Maya, but I like to think I get it close. If I've got it completely wrong, please tell me on Wednesday. Yeah, I had classes for 2 weeks in France, and I found it very challenging. For one thing, we got off the ferry and came out of the train station in Amiens, where there's a beautiful cathedral in Amiens, and came out of the train station, went around the corner, and got mugged. So that was welcome to France, and hadn't even started classes yet, so I had all of my case books and all of my course materials in my backpack, and I just looked like a giant tortoise with, that somebody took one look at that and went, well, if I flip you over on your back, I can take things from you and run away, and you'll still be struggling to get out of your backpack and get up off the cement. So, okay, well, that's good to know, Sophia. But and this was in the early '90s. So I don't know. Maybe it's better now, or maybe it's worse, or at least at this point, we're all talking about it so we can see them coming. It's like I don't think most people go naively into France, not knowing, having some idea what they might encounter. Especially young people. Like young people. I was so naive when I was a young person. But we didn't get hurt too much. They didn't get anything away from us because I'd been reading this book about European customs and manners, and one of the things it said was in France, people don't like touch each other or hug unless it's family and they haven't seen each other in a long time. And this fella, like, I already had a bad sense about it because it was two of us and there were five of them, and they walked up and they surrounded us. So my spidey senses were like, this is not good, this is very bad. But the person I was traveling with was just, trying to speak French and asking for directions to the hotel. And like, I clocked right away, these guys are up to no good. And so he's engaging in conversation and they're just getting positioned around him. And I thought, oh, we are in deep trouble. And then one of the guys reached out and kind of, put his hand on his shoulder, like, I don't know, in a seemingly friendly way. And as soon as he touched him, I just started, like, every alarm went off because I knew that that was socially unacceptable behavior for where we were. And so I yelled no really loudly and yelled my friend's name and said no, and just kept yelling no, no, and then stuck my elbows out and started trying to break out of the circle. And I think they were really surprised that the woman was yelling and fighting, and he just stood there and looked at me like he thought I was being rude. And one of the guys that was mugging us said, "Oh, you let your woman take care of stuff." And my friend kind of turned his head and looked at him, and the guy reached out and just cuffed him on the head and knocked his glasses kind of sideways on his head, but not off on the street. And as soon as there was a movement, I saw a break and just took off running. And fortunately, my friend came running after me. And they chased us a few steps, but they just, we were resisting, so they decided it wasn't worth it. And my friend had a red ear for a few hours, but his glasses didn't get broken. We didn't get anything. Didn't lose. Like, I had a camera bag slung over one shoulder and a backpack on the back and a little book pack worn on the front. And I mean, we were just loaded down. We made ourselves look really like we could be flipped over like a couple of tortoises. And then from then on, like, once we got to class and we could get rid of half of our books and stuff, we were okay and we never had any more trouble. But it pays to know what to expect before you get to somewhere of the danger signs. Also, don't travel with dumb boys. That's the other thing. If you're gonna travel with a fella, pick a smart one. I don't know. Oh, Sophia, I had that too. Or if you ask them if they spoke English and they would say in perfect English, I don't speak a word of English. What do you want? Okay, what I want is for you to, like, is that sarcasm? Is that I mean, my poor brain just trying to suss that out. No, what they want is for you to be French and not give them any trouble. They're busy. I guess. I don't know. We'll laugh about it later. And there were a lot of other places where people were just so friendly and nice. They were delightful in Switzerland, and reserved but helpful in Austria. And in Italy, people would say, well, come home, we'll feed you. I mean, strangers. Um, Amazing. And in Greece, very few people spoke English when I was there. But I spent a lot of time down at the archaeological sites in the Peloponnesian Peninsula. And so it was villages, and well, people were really nice. And we spent some time in Athens as well. People were pretty nice there too. I'm so glad I got a chance to do that. I was in school and I was a really good exchange rate for the dollar that year, and I did a little bit of math and I realized I could stay and go to school at my university, or for a little bit less money I could go on a program that went through various different, like I said we were like a couple weeks in Vienna and Strasbourg. We were also in Luxembourg, Budapest, Geneva. It's just all over the place. And it's a rare occurrence that the dollar is that strong. It's a rare occurrence that I would have time in my life to do that. I hadn't really traveled with my family was not a travel family. Some people do. Some people grow up that way. My family, we would go camping in our local area. We'd go to our beaches or mountains, and so I covered a lot of ground locally, but not too much even in the United States. So I thought, well, here's a chance. I'm going to do it. And I'm really glad I did. And I thought I would get back there. I really expected once I'd gone and kind of figured out how to travel around and how wonderful the trains were, and actually that traveling in a country where I didn't speak the language, that's kind of intimidating. But then when you get there and you find out that it's very manageable, I thought surely I'll be back to travel in Europe when I'm, maybe after I'm working and I have, because I traveled as a student, so you travel in a certain way as a student. You're staying at hostels and looking for student specials, and it's great. But it would have been nice to travel like with some money in my pocket and go everywhere I wanted to go. So Maya's asking, don't they learn English? I would say almost everybody I encountered understood English and probably spoke very good English. What I encountered was a lot of unwillingness to do so. And then other countries you would travel and you would meet people who just wanted to practice their English with you. So it's a cultural difference, I think. And Sophia says they just refuse to speak English with her. So, yeah. And I'd taken a year of French. I had also I'd had about 4 years of Spanish, and for me, like, I could understand the vocabulary, but when it came to producing speech, my brain just chucked in Spanish vocabulary left and right. And the professor spoke. She taught. I think she also taught German, French, and Spanish, and she would just be like, no, 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 no. I couldn't quite, they were just, to my ear, they were just close enough. And I know that sounds goofy because French and Spanish really are very different. But the roots of the words are similar. And so when I'm casting about in my brain trying to find the root of this foreign word, the one that was first in line was Spanish. So I didn't study it beyond that. It was just kind of a, you ever get one of those classes and you know you have to do the homework, and the homework takes 3 times as long as, it was one of those classes. I knew I could do it, but I also knew I would have to work really hard, and it wasn't a class that was in my major, so I just took the 1 year and then moved on to, knowing me in that time, I probably, what I did was drop French after the first year and take a photography class or an art class, so you can't really blame me, can you? And from here, actually, as an American, like, I'm not really thinking that I'm going to go to France. What I'm thinking is I might visit French-speaking portions of Canada. So, yeah. A different nose, also. There's some discussion in the comments about the physiological differences between French and Germans. And Strasbourg is in the Alsace-Lorraine, which is intermittently something not French. I think, as far as territory goes, it's been German, it's been Prussian, Austro-Hungarian. So that area is a little bit different than some other areas, but like, I know in my family, I have, you look at the family photos, and we do have a prominent nose, and that was something that I noticed, that there is a sort of a French nose. Yes, historically disputed territory. That was diplomatic. Yeah. But a lot of people, like, walking down the street, you would hear a lot of German as well as French. And I found Strasbourg was generally easier to navigate than, say, the areas around Paris or northern France. Well, and the European Parliament is in Strasbourg too, so they're quite used to having lots of people from different countries. Out and about. Boy, I remember the wine was amazing. You get a beautiful bottle of white wine for the equivalent of $2. Hmm. Mm-hmm. I'll tell you, if you want to walk down the streets and people watch and just see beautiful human beings, it's hard to beat Italy. And it's, yeah, I just got right beside him. Try not to touch that. Causing myself trouble getting the water buttered right up to another wet one. Let's see if I can navigate it. Yeah, I was in Florence, and I was really struck by how nicely everybody is turned out. Like, the grooming is like beautiful haircuts, well groomed, lovely clothes. Um, the only people wearing sneakers or athletic shoes were Americans, but the locals were all wearing, you know, linen suits and nice, because I was there in summer, and nice leather shoes and um, beautiful jewelry. And, you know, here I'm an American student schlubbing along in my shorts and tennis shoes, or running shoes, actually. And looking like I've, you know, just wrung out because it's warm and it's summertime, and you'd look over at the locals and they just were beautifully cool as a cucumber, right? Stylish, and um, you know, not all, like, a lot of people who were physically beautiful, but a lot of people who were physically just maybe ordinary or a little plain. But you know, you dress them up with some nice Italian clothing, and my goodness. Pragmatic, casual chic. Exactly. Exactly. So the rail pass that I had did not cover Scandinavia. It covered as far north as Germany, but then to go to Denmark, Sweden, Norway. I don't think Finland was included. Finland was, um, oh, it might have been. I don't recall exactly. And travel-wise, I mean, while I was in Vienna, I might have, like, that's pretty far north. But basically, to get to those countries would have been 2 days travel. And because what I had in between the blocks of classes was 3.5 days, so I could go overnight from where I was to Berlin, or overnight to Venice. I kind of just stayed within that range of someplace that I could get a train in the evening and then be someplace else in the morning. And I would have loved to have seen the Nordic countries, as my great-grandmother was Norwegian. Well, she was technically, she might have been born over the border in Canada, but her family came and settled in the United States, and her older siblings were all born in Norway. So they spoke Norwegian in the home, and yeah, so that was even then I knew that I had family that was from Scandinavian countries. So, and Maya, I know you'll know the family. Their last name was Johnson. um, yeah. Um, I just did some genealogy earlier this year, and I can't tell you off the top of my head, but I will. Yeah, we'll talk about that more because you might have some answers. I want to say I looked at a map and it was like kind of the middle. Like I know it was halfway up Norway into the west. Was as much as I could narrow it down. It wasn't a. Everybody knows the Johnsons. It's such a. It's a very. It's all. It's probably more common than Smith here, and like it's very. Yeah. Yeah. And the thing is um, like it wasn't even close to being Johnson. It was just when they immigrated, and this happened a lot. If you had a kind of a complicated family name that the person who was filling out the paperwork couldn't spell, they'd just look up at you and go, "Are you from? Are you from Great Britain? Fine, you're a Smith. All right, are you from Norway? Fine, you're a Johnson." Um, and and so the family name is actually more complicated than that, and uh, I should know this off the top of my head, but I don't right now. Something that was started with an S, so not even anything remotely. Uh, I get to thinking about stuff and talking, and then I grab the wrong paintbrush. Let's get this bad boy filled in here. Yeah, and I couldn't get very far. I got stars roots, stars, something with a star in it. And I could only get one generation back in Norway. I couldn't get very far at all. And I also have some Scottish relatives, and if you're related to anybody who was baptized, you can trace your Scottish roots back quite a ways. So I think I made it into the 1200s on that side of the family. And discovered I had some Italian ancestors, so that was quite exciting because it's there's a lot of artists there, and it's like, ooh, I like that connection, but it's so remote as to be culturally irrelevant to my family today. We have other things that interceded. Maya says it is weird, and I like it. It's a country. I mean, we'd call it like the Great Melting Pot. Like, um, it's a little inconsistent to be so hostile to people because of their nationality. And but there's also this move that like you're here, so assimilate, become an American and let go of your Eastern European heritage, let go of your particularly anything that's um, like English, right? Because of the whole revolution situation. And instead of just letting everybody kind of come and be whatever, it's just you see a lot of pressure to Americanize, whatever that means, and abandon those old world um, ways of doing things. Like, don't don't keep your neighborhoods just the old culture. Try to be like everybody else. So, and that got enforced. Like people, if you especially, well, to immigrate, you did have to be able to read and write. That was a condition, and one of my ancestors couldn't demonstrate that she could read and write, so she was kept at Ellis Island for months, and then she was engaged, and her fiance left New York, moved to Canada, met residency requirements and got a job there, and like had to have a certain amount of money, and then he traveled to Ellis Island and got her, and they traveled up through New York and back to Canada. And then some years later, after she had learned to read and write, then they tried, and they were able to immigrate from Canada into the United States. Genealogy, boy, you learn some stuff that just, it's so, I feel like it's really contrary to the ideas I was taught as a child that America's this great place and everybody can come, and if you work hard you can make your way through it. But it turns out there's actually, in reality, a lot of barriers for people to enter. And then now, like you all know how hateful we are about this wall building nonsense. So, and it's so foolish that the people who come through are people that do work that we really need. I'll tell you, even in the 1960s when my grandfather was still, he was still trying hard to make a living off of the farm, and we had orchards, and we could not have harvested those orchards, we couldn't have harvested that produce without migrant picking crews. And they came from Mexico. They worked their way up, starting in California, and they'd work their way with the crops up through Oregon and then into Washington. And there's no way, there just weren't enough people living here who would help with that. So I have a question for you guys. Is genealogy something that is a hobby or an interest for you or for friends? I wonder if Americans, like, there's a lot of Americans who are really fascinated with genealogy, and I wonder if that comes from just knowing that our ancestors, just a few generations back, like they were someplace else. Whereas I'm assuming, like Maya, like was your family in Norway for generations, and so you wouldn't necessarily want to go, like, because you kind of knew where they were, right? And for a lot of us, well, I started digging into it actually because my grandmother and quite a few of my relatives were born in Canada. And there for a while, if your grandparent was a Canadian citizen, it was a ticket back to Canada. And the laws have changed, and especially after World War II, there were these loyalty not a pledge exactly, but one of my one of my grandmothers was married to a man who was a Canadian citizen. So when she was married to him, she was a Canadian citizen. And then after he left the picture, and I had always been told that she had divorced him, that he had abandoned the family and she had divorced. But when I did the genealogy, what I discovered was that she had never obtained a divorce because he had apparently died. So she was still married to him. But in the wake of World War II, anybody who was not a U.S. citizen was looked upon with a lot of suspicion, not just people who were of Japanese ancestry, but also just anybody who was had foreign citizenship. And so that grandmother signed a paper saying that she repudiated her Canadian citizenship and that she was divorced from her husband. And she wasn't divorced. She had gotten paperwork, but he had never been, there was never any evidence that it had been, that he had been served or that she had gotten a decree of divorce. But I think she signed it in about 1943. So there was a lot of pressure to demonstrate that you were a patriot and that you weren't any kind of foreign agent. So anyway, she executed that paper, and that's enough to break her citizenship ties to Canada. They have a specific law that says if you had done that, then okay, all right, you get your wish. You're no longer a Canadian citizen. You know, your descendants don't have any claim on Canadian citizenship. Very, very odd how we fence ourselves off from our fellow human beings that way. Mm. I'm, I'm not going to talk about the pets. I'm not going to go there, Maya. But yeah, no. Yeah, no. Hi. Hence my drive to go to Canada. So Sophia says, you just have baptism records, and baptism records are tremendously valuable. That's how I was able to trace the Canadian line and back to France to, I think it got into my French relatives to the tune of about 1350. But Scottish, because apparently my ancestors were churchgoers, so there were baptismal records. And with those, then you have the parents, and you'll have some marriage records too. They get they get tied into the baptism records. So, and a few burial records, especially in Canada, they have good records on where people are buried. So that will give you a year, and then you've got a good idea of where they were living because usually you're buried pretty close to where you were living. And oh, cool. Sophia's great grandfather had some free time during the 1940s and traced the family tree far, far back. Wow. And back then, doing that work without computers, he must have, like, that takes some devotion. You've got to stick with it. You've got to write letters and get records, and that's really cool. I have one aunt in the family who does genealogy, but she she traces her family. She's married in, so she only has a little bit on her husband, which is the person I'm blood related to. Ah. But she had lots of good tips on places to go, and there were a couple of locales where our family trees had branches. So anything that was, she had a lot of stuff in Illinois, and we had some things that were. Well, hello, Miriam. Hello, hello. Just working my way through these pebbles, and we are talking about genealogy, and I had a great-grandfather that we always thought was Danish, and then it turned out when I got into the genealogy and the census and the immigration records, he was Irish. That's not Danish. That's not even close. Excuse me so much. Yeah, so for all my life, I've thought I had a Danish great-grandfather and a Norwegian great-grandmother. But and I haven't gone down that branch to see if if his parents came from Denmark to Ireland, but that's a migration path I've not heard. So I would be very surprised by that. Hmm. Oh, Maya. Oh, dear. Oh, Finnish. That's pretty cool. That is pretty cool. We hear such good things about Finland, that people are really happy to live there, and that the standard of living is pretty good, and that the happiness scales, like Finnish people are happier than. I think you're that Finnish people in Finland, or Finnish citizens, are among the happiest, if not the happiest in the world. So hard to argue with that. Oh yeah. Yeah, it helps you get a little touch of nobility in there. The records are suddenly plentiful, aren't they? Yeah. So DJ Nico, he's Finnish too, right? And he lives in Sweden. Boy, I'm just gonna have to get a map and just start putting pins on it for all these new friends and all the places you are. Pretty cool. I gotta confess, I'm starting to get pretty bored with these drab background colors. But when this is done and I look at it, I will be pleased. Just how it goes sometimes. Yeah, that's so interesting to me too, because like if you, I guess what thinking about it, and I think, oh, wow, if you lived on a tropical beach and it was sunny with trade winds and nope. Scandinavia. And I, looking back, I lived in Alaska for a while, so a cold climate with distinct seasons, and you know the winter time where we spend a lot of time indoors. You spend time with people, with your family, and not all out running around. So you've got some of these things that I think really lead to happiness, like a cozy home and family to spend time with. I don't know if that has anything to do with it. I think, you know, we read the reports and it says, oh, well, there's a lot of um, vacation time and family leave and um, socially things are, there's resources for new parents and there's resources for people who are dealing with illness or disability that countries like America, the United States, could do a much better job on. I don't know. Don't know what it is. But it was easy to be happy up in Alaska. I'll put it that way. Oh, Maya. So, Maya says that she changed her last name to an old family name while she was drugged after a surgery. So, that's wild. Well, I'm getting close to getting all these bad boys filled in. There's quite a few little white spaces here compared to the other paintings of rocks I did, so I haven't quite let myself ruminate about that. Whether I'm gonna fill in with little pigment pen circles or just leave it white. I feel like it needs a texture or something back there. The other two I did have all of the little interstices are filled with tiny pebbles, so the whole thing um, is covered. And then the ones that I did were a half sheet size. Those got a wash, so I was trying to make it look like they were in a fountain or in a pool of water. So the wash covered that background area. And I didn't want to use a wash on this one. I wanted these rocks to look like they were dry and just in the sun instead of wet. So it's a little bit of a design problem I've got to resolve, but it'll work itself out. Something always comes to mind if you just kind of soften the focus a little bit, and I find the painting will tell me what it needs to have to be completed. And I like I said, I was thinking that those little intermediate areas could just be left white, but the more I get towards the end of this painting, I'm not sure that's gonna look like it's completed. So I'll have to figure something out. Now, Sophia, was it actually cold seawater or was it Eric Rader's cold seawater? Because we got a little splash there, didn't we? I think as a person who's got a bit of the neurospicy thing going on, I think I was thinking about what Maya said the other day about how your culture is much more uniform. Like if you came in a waiting room, everybody would be behaving kind of the same way. You wouldn't have a huge variety of expression. So if you had a situation, you would stand out. And I was thinking about that, and how, in some ways, it'd be comforting just to be able to know what the expectation was. Knowing me, I'd probably chafe at that a bit because I have some tendencies to be what we call in the United States a rugged individualist. At least when I was young. I think now that I'm older, I value conformity a little bit more. And it's not conformity for conformity's sake. It's just like knowing what the expectations were, and then it'd just be a little easier to navigate, maybe. Actual cold seawater. Well, that's awesome. Yeah. And Maya says that she can't imagine what it would be like to live without free education and free healthcare. And then imagine negotiating everything in your healthcare the way I've had to negotiate with these home contractors, because it's difficult to find a doctor who is accepting new patients. They are allowed to say, no, we're not taking anybody new. And particularly since 2020, it's just been a struggle. And I live in a pretty good sized city, so you would think, oh, there'll be all the specialists you need to see would be here, and they are, but they're allowed to say they're not taking new patients. So if you don't have the very best type of insurance, they can say, oh, well, we're already taking our quota for that type of insurance, so we don't have to see you. And it's a struggle. I had a friend in Canada, and she would talk about how she would have to wait, weeks and weeks and weeks to get into a hospital to get an MRI test. But then once she got her diagnosis, then she was able to have access to all the healthcare she needed. But to go from the time that she'd had a biopsy for a lump in her breast, and then she had to wait almost 2 months before she could get another scan. And in America, if you got diagnosed with a lump, you would probably be able to get a biopsy done within days. Like, we really just rushed to start treatment, and I can just remember the waiting and the waiting, and then she had to go on to have some more treatment, which she came out, she was fine. It was okay in the end, and it was just simply because at that time there was one scanner in British Columbia. So this would have been in the 1990s, and they have more capacity to do testing now, but free, but having to wait that long, I don't know if I could have waited for 2 months. I might have just crossed the border into Washington and found a place to pay for it. Because that's a lot to live with, not knowing for 2 months. And this is a memory test. Did I get one of the... Yes, I did. Okay. To remember where I put the water, it's hard to see. Come back and get that pigment put into it. Yeah. Liza, nice to see you. Whoop, whoop. Oh, we were talking about just now. I was rambling on about the different ways that healthcare is accessed in different parts of the world. So, yeah, that's crazy. And I th- I think when you're kind of at the stage that she's at, because she's been battling it for so long, and I do believe she said she's stage 4, which is usually terminal. And but people, even in stage 4, some people in some diseases, they can go years and years, but it's generally understood that once things have reached stage 4, that it's a that's the disease that you're going to be fighting all the rest of your days. You might have quite a few days, but yeah, my stepsister was stage 4, and then she had 6 years. But eventually, she had her cancer metastasized to her neck in an area where they couldn't operate. So you just try to get through chemotherapy and buy yourself time and hope that you know it's going to recur, you know it's going to come back. That's the reality of being stage 4. And you hope that where it comes back will be someplace that you can get, that you can treat that tumor. So, yeah, I personally, I would take a different approach. I don't, I've watched people in my family go out fighting and using chemotherapy and other really intense treatments, and it it impacts your quality of life. So I'll work on things intensely in my life. I'm not sure that that kind of a fight that intensely is how I could spend my last months. And at the point where you're paying for it out of pocket, that means that an insurance company has said that, well, they've made a decision on it, right? And then once you reach that point, like in America, you can get money out of your pocket and keep fighting, but at that point there's a board of people, and there's probably a lot of doctors who said that your outcome is inevitable. I could really do without cancer. I really could. Yeah, Maya says, how nice would it be if we could only fight the cancer and not have to fight the bills too? Yeah, I agree with that. Yeah, I'm pretty averse to spending time in a hospital that I didn't have to. And I think I would take a shorter measure of a life that was not spent in hospital over longer time that was. So I don't deal well with the sounds, the smells, the sights, any of it. And there's quite a few people who've had experiences with healthcare, and sometimes that environment is more traumatizing than the medical care that we get while we're in it. So why would we want to go back? Why would we want to? We just, we wouldn't. Doesn't make sense. So Liza, what have you been up to? You have been back. You're starting the new semester, right? Tell us something about your young, youthful life and get us off this cancer topic. Please, if you wouldn't mind. Oh, Miriam, we'll send you a card. Maya and I are in that club too. Yeah, I have PTSD from a discrete traumatic event. I also deal with complex post-traumatic stress injury, whatever the heck we're calling it this week. Um, so, like, I specifically like get the trauma response when I get anywhere near medical settings. So, there's hate 'em, and then there's run away in your bare feet out out of the waiting room, out through the lobby, out to the staircase, and down through the parking lot of the hospital. Run away, which is, hello, that's me. Yeah. So, come to think of it, I don't think I've ever met any person who said, "Oh, I loved my stay in the hospital. It was fantastic." I just wonder if they do that. What they do, just we'll stay healthy just so we don't have to go back to that place. Maybe it's part of the plan. I'm joking. It better not be part of the plan. More green. All right. It was. Maya says, "Run, Forrest, run." Uh, I think as fast as I was going, Forrest would have been trying to keep up with me that day. Oh my goodness. I'll save that. I'll save that full story for another time. We had a lot of strategies for getting me to the medical care that I was like. My brain was just like, yeah, I need to get this X-ray and see this orthopedic oncologist, and yeah, I'm here to do that. And then the panic takes over, and you're just along for the ride. Yeah, Miriam, yes. Yep. The year before my mom died, she spent over 100 days in the hospital, and since I'd had something kind of bad happen while I was in the hospital, we'd made a promise in our family that no one would ever have to spend a night in the hospital alone. So 2 out of 3 nights I spent sleeping in the hospital in my mom's room, and my dad was supposed to sleep there the other ones, but um, yeah, so I was, I know what that's like to be, um, yeah, to be there, because somebody, you're not there, aren't required to be there, but somebody you love is there, so. Let's see. I've got a feeling might be time to plug this phone in here. Oh my goodness. ALS. That is one of those diseases that just seems to take a long time and also happen very fast. Yeah, so far in my family, we've had to deal with, I think, my stepsister did die directly from cancer, but a lot of people in my family have had cancer, but most of them have died from heart disease, so. Which it isn't any picnic, but um, it seems to take away physical capacity, but it doesn't impact the thinking or the personality as much as some of these other sorts of diseases do. Wow. Oops. I touch this and then it wants to give me a different screen. She had 13 years. Wow. Sophia says, heart disease affects your quality of life big time. Yeah, word, indeed. Nice, Liza, enjoy that. Chicken adobo for dinner. Yeah, it's heart disease. I, I had a double bypass. I'm diabetic, so I've dealt with diabetes for a long time, and being diabetic gives you an increased risk for heart disease. That is basically the equivalent of a person without diabetes who had had one heart attack already. So if you've had one heart attack, your risk of a second one is pretty high. So if you're diabetic, your risk of having a heart attack is like someone who has already had one. So, and it's hereditary in my family, so I had watched my grandmother go through it, and and my mom. So I knew it was just something I would be confronting. So going from 45 to 63, 62, like that felt like bonus time in a way, because if they hadn't done the double bypass, like I wouldn't have had those years at all. And then 6 months ago when I had the procedure to put 6 stents in my heart, and I was really close to not making it before we got to there. So this last 6 months it's felt like, hey, that's kind of bonus time. Because well, 50 years ago we weren't doing stents, so 50 years ago I wouldn't have had that time. And certainly 100 years ago I would have never even seen 50. So even though my activity is really, my capacity to do things is pretty limited, I did a little bit of yard work this morning, and then I came in and I slept for 4 hours. And I try to look at it like the good side of it is I was alive to go out and be in the sunshine and do a little bit of yard work. And after that 4 hour nap, I woke up and, I get to sit here and paint. So, don't get me wrong, I've spent a lot of days just being pissed off that why is everything so difficult? Why is it so small? Why can't I go hike the 7 mile path around the waterfalls like I used to be able to do? Now I can still go to the waterfalls, but I do a lot more like pulling off and stopping at the viewpoints and walking maybe a few hundred miles or a few hundred miles. I wish a few hundred yards down a more accessible path. And then I just have to remind myself that the alternative isn't, hiking 10 miles. The alternative is not being here at all. It's not super easy, but if you do it enough times, you get better at being grateful for what you do have. So thank you. Yeah, exactly. Exactly. It could have been worse. It was worse. Now it's a little bit better because like actually I have more capacity to do things than I did in particularly the 2 or 3 months right before my procedure, because it got really bad. And because I've just reached the 6 month mark, and there were a couple of medications that I had to take after the procedure for 6 months. So I've been checking in with my doctors, and now they're telling me, like, that like the cardiac surgeon was like, I'm really glad to see you because your odds of making it here, like it's touch and go. And each day that you can get out past that procedure and, you know, just grab a little bit of life back, get a little bit stronger, heal up, get those stents healed into place. Every day that you go and you don't have a blood clot that blocks one of them, like you do gain ground, but it's tricky, and a lot of people don't make it through it. So he was, and of course they don't really tell you that when you're getting the surgery because everybody's hoping for the best, and some people get lucky like I did, and quite a few don't. So, like, but I didn't really I didn't. I mean, I knew I felt very bad. I felt as close to not being here as I ever had at any of my health struggles. But you know, they don't sit you down and go, well, you've got an 85% chance of dying from this, so let's go. I mean, they say, we're going to do our best, and let's see where we get. So I'll see you on the other side, and then you give it a try. So it's been a little bit eye-opening to have some of those conversations lately. But I've been through some stuff, so I kind of dig down and I get pretty determined, and like some days I go, well, you know, this could be the year, and then other times I think I'm going to be like 87, just going with all my family, just going, how is she still, like, everything's almost killed her, and here she still is, just stubborn and hanging on. I don't know. We don't know. We don't have any way to know. You just try to think of something that you want to stick around to do, and then take some steps towards that. That's about all you can do. Alrighty. Just give you guys a heads up. I'm gonna go till probably. We're gonna wrap this up it's been at 2:30, 2 hours and 30 minutes, and we're running right about 2 hours and 20 minutes now. So we're getting close to finishing up tonight. I was kind of aiming for an hour and a half, and then you know how it goes. I love it when you guys come in and chat and there's somebody to hang out with, so I'm always willing to go a little bit longer for that. But I know everybody's got stuff to do. It's Monday. Unless you're in Australia, right? Then it might be Tuesday, I think. Mm-hmm. So Sophia's grandmother had had surgery back in the day. Yeah, my first procedure was an open heart procedure, and it was it, it, uh, it was extremely painful. Having because they go through your sternum and they go right down the middle, and they open up your ribs, and so you're sore all the way around because you're sore, like, as they open you up, like where your ribs connect to your backbone is kind of gets wrenched apart, and then they kind of shove your lungs out of the way, get a hold of your heart and do some stuff to it. And that was not anything I ever want to go through again. On this last procedure, they were able to use basically a robot to go in through a big blood vessel at the top of my leg. And so the thing that really was kind of sore was I had a bruise on the area around my femoral artery. And my chest felt weird because they put a bunch of hardware in my heart. But it didn't hurt anywhere near the pain level of just having to have an open heart procedure. Those are a lot. And thank goodness they can do so many procedures now without having to be so invasive. Like most of the things they do, like some of the stuff that they fixed this last time, they couldn't fix it with my original procedure. And in that interim, they've made developments in the way the stents can perform, so that now they can put some into places where there's a twist or a bend. And when I had my first procedure at 45, there wasn't even a medical device. They had to go in and take a blood vessel and graft a blood vessel in there. And now it's less impactful, and the survival rate is much higher, so it's all better. Wait, your grandmother was a surgeon? Wait a second here. So, I read that wrong. Grandma did a heart surgery in the early years of it, and it was a big surgery with huge logistical issues for the medical staff, and it really saved lives. Holy moly! That's amazing, Sophia. Wow. Yeah, it does kind of, the sternum does get in the way of getting to the heart. So we'll just go right through the front door of the human chest. Oh my goodness. How have I done that? I've somehow managed to get my brushes. I thought I was fighting that brush a little bit. I'm using the bigger one to put the water down, and then the smaller one to put the pigment in, and last couple of rocks it's felt a little bit challenging because I got my tools mixed up, which is one of the reasons why I like to use paintbrushes with two different handles when I'm doing this. Hey, if this is the biggest mistake I make today, it'll be all right. I kind of want to run with these reddish colored ones here. I don't want to get a grouping of too many of the same color in the same area. Yeah, my goal is to just get through the rest of my days without needing a major medical procedure. I think that would be good. Gosh, I remember being a young person and my great aunts and uncles and like all of the quote unquote old people, and how they would talk about their lumbago and their sciatica and their gallbladder, and just being a kid going, oh my God, are these old people ever going to shut up about this? And, the other thought, I'll never do this. And then I got old, and here we are. Oh, I think it's because we remember when life was easy, and it was a precious time. And it is a bit of a shock to the system. Like, how did you go from just being able to dash up 2 flights of stairs without even having your breath, not even being out of breath? And now I see 2 flights of stairs and look for an elevator. Whoop, that one went really dark. Hi, No Face. Your grandmother sounds like a hell of a woman. Did you get to spend time with her and like get to know her? You know, I had one grandmother I get to spend a lot of time with, the other one not so much. I hope you did. That's so cool. I was in my family. We were all farmers and working class people. I was the first person in my family to go to college. My grandmothers had an eighth grade education, and my parents, both of them, managed to get a high school education. And I have some cousins in my generation who, quite a few of us, managed to get into college. So I think I actually do want to use this smaller brush for the water. Now I'm to the really little rocks. We must be getting close to the finish. So it's good to see you in No Face. Right? I used to love horses and being around them. We didn't have horses, but I would always find out who the horse girls were in school and try to make friends with them. So, and every chance I got to hang out and do horse stuff, I would. The last time I got on a horse, we got back to camp and I just thought, oh my God, my butt hurt, my legs hurt, and I was sunburned, and the horse was cranky, and I thought, horseback riding is something you do have to kind of keep, you have to keep in shape for. It uses parts that, um, anyway. You wouldn't think riding a horse down a beach would be that painful. It wasn't painful while I was doing it. It was just like the next morning, waking up and just going, "Oh wow, I'm older. My body is older than my brain thinks it is." I think now, if I was on a horse and took a look around, I might actually have the common sense to realize that I'm, 5.5 feet up in the air and it's a long ways down. But it didn't occur to me when I was younger. So, thank goodness, do things when you're young. Yeah, we used to have I live in Oregon, and so we're on the Pacific coast, and there used to be several companies where you could rent a horse and ride on the beach. Wow. I think a lot of us had, like, just if we heard stories of our grandmothers because of the generation we're in and because of how exponentially huge the growth in technology has been, like from our grandmothers and great grandmothers to hear their stories, I think a lot of us would just have incredible tales to tell about what our grandmothers did. I know my own grandmother was cooking in a lumber camp when she was 16 years old. I mean, I couldn't even. Oh, I could. I could barely do my own laundry. I couldn't do it without, throwing a red sock in with the white clothes. And she was away from home, up in British Columbia, cooking food for a whole camp of lumberjacks at 16. And then married my grandfather and was basically taking care of all of our chores on a farm. So he would be out doing some of the tractoring and stuff, and basically all the small animals that were in the barn were her responsibility, along with 3 kids. And that farmhouse, like it had been built before we had electricity in the area, so it was a get up in the morning and build a fire kind of a farmhouse. I don't know how they did it. I mean, I do know how they did it. They got up early and they worked themselves hard, but so much different from our world today, most of us. Sophia, you are a force of nature. She says she used to do acrobatics on horses and chose to jump off when I was younger. That's wild. Please tell me they were ponies. I know they're gonna be big horses. And Maya says she still struggles with the Red Sox. Dice have changed a lot, so that now you don't always. Red is a little bit more color fast than it used to be, but I am. Are you like me? Like if you look at a packet of socks, and I like to buy the ones that come in the groups with the different types of socks. I'll like you buy 6 pairs at a time, but I'll look through them. If there's one of the socks has red in it, I won't buy the packet. I just don't anymore. I kind of like a bright red sock, but they're just like I don't take that trouble home with me anymore. And now I see the time and I've blown right past, so maybe we'll go a little longer. Oh. Alrighty. So, you did it as a sport. You're a horse family. Okay. So, can you tell us more? Like, I'm familiar with, we have rodeo here in the United States. Like, we have barrel racing and roping and things like that. We also have dressage. We have hunter jumpers. And we have some endurance sport. I can't think of the name of it, but people will do trail riding and they usually use Arabians because they've got such endurance. And my friend used to compete in those, and they would go on a time trial on horseback, and it would be probably at least a 20-mile course, and there would be stations where they would have to stop and maybe shoot targets. So I think here the only place I've seen acrobatics on horses is part of circuses. But I guess there will be trick riders at rodeos and stuff too. Oop, still wet. Brushed that one a little bit. And go up here. There's no way I'm not gonna stop the stream when I'm still hearing about trick riding. That's fascinating. Okay. So you do what acrobats do, just adapted to being on a horse. Nothing like standing on a galloping horse. Okay, so what's the horse doing while you're doing the acrobatics? Dope. You know, I'm getting on YouTube when I get done, and I'm gonna be, I'm gonna be searching for this. Mm. Wow. So, what breed of horses were used for this? When I was in Vienna, I was so disappointed because we were there in summer. So the Lipizaners were up in the mountains. So I had read books about the Lipizzaner stallions and was thinking, oh, I'll be able to go see them, go to the stables and maybe even see one of the shows. And in the summer, the horses are up in the mountain, um, up where it's cool, eating grass and doing horse stuff. So I was happy for the horses, but I was a little disappointed. I did, however, eat lots of cake, lots of pastries, and listened to Mozart being played in the park, and went to the opera and watched a performance of ballroom dancers and orchestra doing the quite cheesy Blue Danube waltz. You gotta do it though. You gotta go get that T-shirt. Exactly. Yeah, that's what I like in a horse. One that doesn't kick you or bite. Ooh, I'm getting really close to getting all of these guys done. Now it's kind of got a bit of momentum to it. Ah. Well, I'm sure you guys just saw that flash. That's my phone. Um, it very briefly gave me the I'm overheating signal, but then it came right back up. But I think we'll probably take that as a little nudge to wrap it up. And very, very close to having all these pebbles filled in. Get just a little handful of little blank spots. So I think I'll leave it. Sometimes A painting will benefit from having a little bit of a rest, a few hours, and you come back to it with fresh eyes, and I'll see that I might need to balance some of the colors, and so I'm not going to push to finish everything right now, because it might just need a touch of some color, and it's easier to just put the color there in the first place instead of trying to lift out and drop it in. I've really enjoyed the conversation, and delighted to learn a little bit more about Sophia. I think that's just amazing. I don't know. Sometimes I think about the folks we're with in chat, and I imagine the different lives that we have and what we do. And I know there's a huge amount of skills and a lot of talent, but you can't even imagine something as marvelous as horseback acrobatics, voltage or voltage. I will look that up and learn more about it. It just sounds wonderful. But thanks everybody for coming in. Thanks for spending some time doing art with me, and I hope everybody has just a terrific week, and avoids any kind of medical settings. And then that just let's try to do things this week that are fun, and try to avoid doing things that are not fun. And if we do have to interact with a medical setting, let's just hope it's routine and pretty high speed, low drag. Thank you for subscribing. Thanks for your likes. Thanks for your kindness to one another. And thanks for spending time with me. We'll see you next time. Bye. Avoid not fun. That's it, Maya. And yes, with the tedious. It's going to be a lovely fall week. Maya, thank you as always for moderating and keeping us in line. I appreciate all of you, and we'll see you next time. Bye now.